Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek Program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in the Laugh House because we have a Magnolia Eternal Spring blooming in the corner over here. There's also an Edgeworthia blooming over there that I really wanted to be sitting in front of, but due to cinematography considerations, I'm over here. The sacrifices we go through to put on programs for you. Anyway, today we've got a program for you. We are going deeper in the garden. We are going to be talking Evergreen Asian Magnolias. We've got Greg Paige, our Director of Horticulture, and Mark Weathington, our Director as well. We are going to go deep into the Evergreen Asian Magnolias and various hybrids of them. So that should be an interesting program. So those of you joining us on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I think we can pass things over to Mark and Greg to tell us a little bit about Evergreen Asian Magnolias.
Thank you, Blake. This is one of those favorite topics from that Greg and I have. We both share a love for magnolias. I'll put another plug out there for our Magnolia Study Day. March 9th. Greg and I are both on the Magnolia Society International board, so we need good representation at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum for this. So
yes.
Sign up and come. It's going to be a great day. You'll get infected with our excitement for magnolias.
Hopefully.
And it's a good time to come visit the Arboretum. The magnolias have started. It's always, you never know what they're going to do. Sometimes they get hit by the frost, the early ones, sometimes they don't. But I was walking around today looking at the evergreen ones, but the deciduous magnolias are popping now too.
They're getting cranked up. And one of the perils of being a magnoliophile and I like all magnolias. One of the biggest perils is exactly what Mark said, is you never know what they're going to do with the climate. They're usually one of the first things that start to pop when it gets warm. And then, heartbreakingly, those flowers turn a nice, muddy, dirty brown and don't look so nice. So that has kind of influenced what we picked out today. There weren't a lot in flower, but it's a subject that's worth talking about because I'm going to wax poetic.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I, if you haven't been on any of my tours or listened to me talk about plants, I like things that look good all times of the year. And the nice thing about the evergreen magnolias is they're evergreen, so you have that aspect of them. They also usually have really interesting buds. They also usually have interesting leaves in the underside of the leaves. Sometimes they're silver, sometimes they're very hairy, have lots of endomentum. And all of those factors have kind of pulled into them being used a lot. There's a lot of more interest in breeding them because of those reasons. We've got very good friends and colleagues that are doing that. A shout out to Kevin Paris down in Spartanburg. He's done a ton of work on the evergreen ones, and our friend Dick Figler, who's kind of helped define them or tell us that they aren't what we think they are, yeah. which happens. But it's a group that I've always been interested in. I kind of tend towards the native ones, but there are so many shapes and sizes, and we got a couple that we want to talk about today.
Yeah. So magnolias in general, and it depends on your taxonomist of choice, 50 species, although new ones are being discovered, especially in Central America, all the time now. That's really hotbed. And they range from Canada down to Brazil, southern Brazil, the Caribbean, India, over through China to Japan and Korea, and then all the way down through Indonesia to New Guinea. A lot of breeding of magnolias in New Zealand and Australia, but none native there.
Yep.
So, and we're talking about evergreen Asian magnolias today. There are great native ones, of course, and the southern hemisphere, South American, Central American ones are, most of those are evergreen. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole network of gardens that hold magnolia collections that it's called the Plant Collections Network. We have, at the Arboretum, we have redbud national collection through the Plant Collection Network. And then we're also part of a multi-institute magnolia collection. There's so many magnolias, no one place could really hold them all. And so there's a lot of gardens that are part of that. And one of the things that we hold a lot of that other gardens don't necessarily are these evergreen Asian magnolias. We're milder than a lot of the other ones, so we can grow a lot of these plants. So that's why we've kind of gravitated toward these in some way in terms of our collection. There are just so many fantastic deciduous ones that, it's, and it's like potato chips with us, how can you have just one? And so sometimes it can get overwhelming in our 10 acres to try and have that many. So
that's the only thing that's restricted that is space.
Yeah.
There are so many that I would like to have, but we simply don't have the space for that. And pigtailing on what you just said, the Plant Collection Network, which is a part of the American Public Garden Association, we have a really good, robust collection of magnolias here. So not to shamelessly promote the Magnolia Study Day, but that's a good reason to come, if nothing else, to get a chance to tour closer into the season when a lot of those are going to be open. But we're in a part of the country where our niche is the evergreen Asian ones.
All right, I'm going to quiz you.
Go.
How many different magnolias do you think we have, including the nursery?
Oof. I should have. I was this close to getting that information before I came up here.
I had to write it down.
He beat me to the punch. I should know this because I used to be the one that wrangled up the collections for I was the Plant Collection Network coordinator for magnolias. I'm not going to butcher it. What is it?
184.
That's impressive.
184.
That's
so
impressive.
We've got a lot out there. So what did you bring for us?
So I'm gonna lead with what we've already talked about. Eternal Spring. This is, I always say it's one of my favorites, but this is one of my favorites. I first got this one. First place I saw it was Cliff Park's garden many years ago.
Yeah, and Cliff Parks was the original owner, proprietor of Camellia Forest.
Yep.
And he was where you got a lot of really unusual things early days.
Yeah. And linked into a lot of great people doing some, breeding and so I'm thinking of like Bill Smith, and our friend who we just saw.
Oh, Pat McCracken.
Pat, he was at the
Tom Krasinski.
Tom Krasinski, yes. Don't let me forget to mention Tom. But the thing I love about this one is it's one of the first things that really start heavily blooming in the spring. And you can see the one behind us, and the Maudii in it has big flowers. And there's a really nice one bordering in the perennial garden, just a straight Maudii. But this thing, the fragrance of this is absolutely overwhelming. And that's such a great thing to have in the spring when you're coming out of a kind of a dismal winter. And when the temperature's rising and falling, this one's pretty tough. It doesn't burn easily. And it's usually riddled with a lot of flower buds. There's still more on here that are to come open. And that's one of the other nice things about it is it starts early, but it goes for a really long duration. Yeah. Usually they come out all at once, get blasted by the cold, and then they're done. If this gets hit by an early cold, there's a lot more flowers in reserve that you'll still get a good flower show. I like the foliage. Yes, it's green, but it's a good texture. The leaves are kind of small, and I think a little more rounded than Maudii, but I just love this plant. I've got to find one for my new home garden because I want something that's fragrant close by where I'll catch that whiff. And if nothing else, come visit us this week because of all the smells that are going on in the garden too. It's astounding.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about this Eternal Spring, it does open over a long period, so you get that. But the flowers too, some of these evergreen ones the flowers will stay kind of cupped. And so even when it's in full flower, it doesn't look as full on the tree. Yep. And the one behind us, they really open up and show against that green. So I really like that. Now, here's the test. Can I actually smell it? Oh, yeah. I can smell it. That's good.
If he can smell it, it's a good one.
All right.
But that is a good point, that a lot of them stay nice and tight, but they do definitely open up, and you can really see the inner workings, and the show is much better, I think.
Yeah, once this started, our plant started going and really started going really well. I was like, this is a good name for it, Eternal Spring, because it really does start when the weather starts getting springy a little bit, like right now, and keeps going on through pretty late in the season.
Yep. This is one that's not quite ready, but we just need a few more warm days and it's going to explode. And you're going to have to help me with the lineage of it. Serendipity.
Well, I don't know that I'm going to be able to help you out a whole lot with it. It's one that we got from Bobby Green, Green Nurseries in Alabama. He does a lot of breeding with camellias and some with magnolias. And we got this as a numbered plant, no name on it. And we just felt it was so good it needed a name. So we begged him to put a name on it and finally told him, listen, the nurserymen here are already starting to propagate this thing. If you don't put a name on it, we will. And so he called it Serendipity because it was lucky that we got it and recognized how good it was. A lot of the breeding in magnolias, these evergreen magnolias, is for real narrow upright. Mm-hmm. But this one grows wide and tall, big kind of upright rounded plant. And you can see on here, it is just loaded with buds. It is buds from
I don't know if
some of these
if
stems.
you can zoom in on those, how pretty the buds are too.
Yeah, and they're that fuzzy gold. A term I learned from a professor we had in common is the term for that is ferruginous. Iron-colored hairs, yes. Ferruginous.
Need to get that on a T-shirt.
That's right.
Ferruginous.
But the nurserymen around here really like this plant Serendipity and are growing a lot of it. It's part of what we do is try and get plants to the nurserymen, and sometimes we have success, sometimes we don't. But if you're in the Triangle area, look for tags that say choice plants at a lot of the nurseries, and this Serendipity is one of those. So it stays nice and evergreen, has smaller leaves. I think it's Lavifolia Figo hybrid, but it has no fragrance, which the figo, the banana shrub, you would think would give it some fragrance. But much like this Eternal Spring, it's just loaded with so many buds, and the buds will open from inside out. So when it starts flowering, the flowers have a little bit of protection. They're not quite as showy because they're inside, but if we get a cold snap and they burn, you've still got buds going all the way out. And so it's usually sometimes end of April. I looked on our plant, and up high and where it's getting a lot of sun, some of the buds are starting to open. You're starting to get color, and this will go through. It's often in flower during our Raulston Blooms event, which is the last weekend in April. So that's not too bad to get 2 months of flower out of this incredible evergreen plant. And I like the small leaves on it. I think it gives it a really nice texture. Yep. And it's really kind of dense.
One of the things with these crosses of some of these evergreens is looking at that actual form. They tend to be kind of leggy and open, and this one stays nice and tight. And our colleague Kevin Paris, who's done some breeding work with some of these, that's kind of what he's been looking at too. And he's got a whole line of them on the campus of Spartanburg Community College in his Arboretum, where he's kind of evaluating for that. And I think that's an important thing too, because yes, you want flowers, fragrance will be good. Evergreen is nice, but I could see this used as kind of a big informal hedge with the benefit of those cool buds and that really pretty flower.
Yeah. So since we're talking about Kevin Paris and some of the stuff he's doing, this is another one. This is another hybrid that comes from Kevin. This is one called Brass Monkey. He named it that. I'm not sure exactly why he named it that, because when I heard it, Brass Monkey, that's an old Beastie Boys song.
Yeah.
And he said he had never heard the song when he named it that. So I don't know.
He has not.
But this one has those ferruginous buds and young stems, but then also the leaves have this really golden, rusty back. And that comes from a species that's hasn't been particularly hardy for us, Magnolia foveolata, which has really nice, when it's the best forms, really gold and beautiful backs to the leaves. And actually, even the new growth has that coloration on it.
We saw those in Japan.
Yes. So this this Brass Monkey and its sister seedling, Dozen Eggs, have these really cupped flowers that almost don't open up all the way, and it just gets loaded. I got a branch with really good color on the backs of the leaves, but it'll have buds all the way up and down there. Now, as opposed to Serendipity, this one, Brass Monkey, grows taller, more like a tree with a central leader. And what impressed me is we had a bad storm and the top broke out of ours. And we meant to kind of create a new leader on there, bend a branch over and shake it up. And we never managed to do that. And it has you wouldn't know it unless you really look. It's completely recovered that pyramidal shape in short order. So that's pretty nice. So how about some you got some species or other things we got over there?
I've got one more cultivar.
One more cultivar, okay.
So this is another cultivar that I'm not 100% up on the lineage of it. Stellar Ruby. Pat McCracken?
Pat McCracken. It certainly has Figo crassipes, the purple.
It doesn't have as much of that, the underside of the leaf, but you can definitely see it on the buds. Another good kind of densely low growing, not that tree-like, which is what I like about some of these because they form that nice rounded mound. And anything that's going to be kind of an alternate flowering shrub that we can promote, this is one of those. Pat is a rabid, really good Magnolia breeder, and this was one of the ones that I think he nailed this one really well. Flowers are whitish pink.
No, this one, Stellar Ruby, is really deep, deep purple,
I'm
red.
Thinking of a deep dark, hence the name. But one of my favorites of that nice kind of rounded forms.
So yeah, Stellar Ruby's a nice one. So I'm gonna go one of the species that kind of gives that same look, and this is not a very common species, but quite distinct from the other ones. You can see it's got those narrow leaves and these incredible ferruginous buds. I don't get to say that often enough. I'm going to take advantage of it.
You're going to wear that one out today.
You say it 3 times and it becomes your own. This is Magnolia amabilis. It is from Southeast Asia, Southeast China, really restricted range. We got it as Magnolia angusti oblonga, which is a true species. And we mentioned Dick Figler at the beginning. Now, Dick Figler, when you go to identify evergreen magnolias, you know what the ID feature is, right? Stipule scars. Stipule scars, which are, I'm not going to try and point it out, but it's on the petiole, the little leaf stem. It's a little mark on there. We got something that might show that.
A little bit bigger here.
Yeah, so here, I'm going to plop a leaf off. So, it's hard to see even on here. It's a little piece here, and we'll be out in the field in Asia, and he'll say, we'll ask him what something is, and now we always say the stipule scar is, 2.3 millimeters long. So I was looking at this, trying to verify angusti oblonga, and the stipule scar did not match with the description. And I sent him a note about it saying that I wasn't sure if this was it because the stipule scar. And I have this email, which I have to show you, Scott, because you're friends with him, when you read it, if you know him, you read it in his voice. There are a lot of exclamation marks, and he's very happy about the whole thing. Yes,
That's how he talks.
It's very funny. But we figured out it's amabilis, and this opens up with a small white flower. And what's interesting with the flower is it looks almost like raku pottery. It's got like lines and crinkles through it that looks almost like it's been fired. It has those white lines to it, but it's really fine texture. Now I will say so far it has not been the most beautiful of forms. It's kind of a scraggly all over the place.
Yeah.
But it may. We were all kind of awkward in our adolescence. It might come out to be just as refined as you and I are one day.
That's a tall order.
But I love that texture. I also love that not many other people have it, although we've been propagating it to get out. But this is a problem with some of these evergreen magnolias. Well, some are just hard to propagate no matter what.
Yeah.
But when you propagate a plant, as you'll learn in our propagation classes that we have various times, what you want is a cutting, usually of growth like this. This is perfect cutting growth, but you don't want flower buds or seed or anything like that on there because all the energy goes to that. And so there's nothing to propagate on this thing because everything is covered with flower buds. And so it gets really difficult to propagate these, which is why so many are grafted. But I really like this.
Like the texture of the leaf.
Amabilis. Yeah, I just find this attractive. And it has been hardy as all get out for us, which has been really surprising.
They do tend to be scraggly. I don't know if that's a seed grown thing or what the reason
I'm not
is.
sure.
What the reason is for that. Longtonguensis, did you bring that one too?
I did not bring Longtonguensis, no.
Okay. This is a species that I've had kind of a love-hate relationship with. I've killed a bunch of these. It's a name that we like to say. And if somebody would ask me what a plant was and I didn't know what it was, my standard answer would be Longtonguensis, just because I like saying the name. But, I've grown this. I've never had one flower. Where is it from?
It's from southern China.
Southern China.
Yeah.
But, I don't think they've done much with this in terms of breeding, but from a conservation standpoint and kind of spreading the wealth around. Mark mentioned the Plant Collection Network group. I know a couple of years ago, somebody passed out a bunch of cuttings of these to different places, and we had a bunch that took, and we sent them all over the country to people that were in that group to try to spread the wealth. I think most of ours ended up dying in the short term. I can't even remember where I got this one from. Where is it in the garden?
It's right at the entrance to the lath house, and it's actually, it's this one to the right.
Yeah.
And it's actually, if you look at our lath house, there's some indentation, there were two magnolias. The only thing when we redid this lath house that we built around were these two magnolias. And the Longtonguensis was one of them. And I talked about, your botanist of choice at the beginning, your taxonomist of choice, how many magnolias there are. Magnolias had been split into several different groups. When some of the evolutionary relationships were looked at, they put them back together. Now some authors are separating them all out again. This is one of the ones that was in an oddball group, the Gwillinia group. Gwillinia? N or M in there, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But it was Pericmeria Longtonguensis at first. And what separates this group from most other ones, most magnolias, and let me see, get a flower here. Most magnolias have a central pistil, that kind of sticks out, surrounded by these stamens in a circle around there. And you'll get on a plant, the pollen will ripen first and fall, and then the stigma will get receptive. So that enhances the chance that it will get pollen from a different plant on there. So if you're doing your breeding, you have to use pollen from one flower and put it on another one. We got a better...
Yeah.
So in the center there, you have that pistil. So, but Magnolia lotungensis is dioecious. It has completely separate male and female plants. So when you couple the fact that it often takes 10 or 15 years before it will flower with the fact that if you only have one plant, you only have one of those two sexes. So we have a male. I have on occasion taken pollen from the male and gone out and dusted it on a couple of different plants. I've never gotten seed formed from that, but I haven't been very thorough with it. But it is a very cool plant.
The form is beautiful.
And I've grown several of these, and the form is always beautiful. The next step is really figuring out who has females, who has males, right, and either getting pollen to the females or propagating the plants so you can plant them close together and get seed. But it is kind of difficult to get to root. So that's why it's hard to find.
But in the realm of why do we have it in the garden, part of it is the conservation side of what we're doing, and being good partners with other gardens to kind of grow this, to see if we can figure some of those things out. And if inevitably we do, we can share that information with our partners that are also doing magnolias. Go.
Now for something completely different. We're looking at all these things with small evergreen leaves. This is actually another very endangered magnolia in the wild, Magnolia delavei. And it actually looks more like, like a thin textured Magnolia grandiflora, or a smaller leaf form of our big leaf magnolias that Greg's done a lot of work with through the southeast. But it's an Asian one, and it is evergreen. And because it is rare in the wild and rare in cultivation, it's one of those plants that a lot of magnoliophiles really get excited about. I am told that typically it is white, but what always seems to get passed around is the red form or pink form, and this is a pink form, as they say. The pink form looks really nice for a little bit, and then even without frost, it kind of looks like fleshy
really
pink
fast
to me. I think the white would probably be even more attractive. The other problem with this is I've never seen a pretty looking plant. They are always kind of wonky and round.
It's got such a coarse, that's not moving at all.
Yeah.
It's got such a coarse texture, but I like that about it. Whenever I've seen this in gardens, I forget, it might have been Weathington. They had one in one of the gardens that we visited there, like just completely out of place. We saw it growing there, but it's such a coarse texture.
I actually have a picture of Greg and I and Ethan from the Atlanta Botanic Garden did a trip to England, and we were getting some plants and go visiting some gardens, and we were at Carehays.
Yes.
And when I was looking at pictures, there's a picture of Ethan in front of a tree, and all you can see are the trunks of delavei like this. That was a pretty impressive tree.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a neat tree. Another tree that is we don't have growing out here yet, but it's one that's being passed around for conservation. Our partners down in Atlanta have some that they're growing out for us. Is Magnolia guangdongensis, which was something that was pretty recently discovered and very hard to find. But the leaves are smaller and rounder, but they range from having none of that ferruginous hairs to being just really densely covered in it. So, there's a lot of these magnolias that are quite rare. The wood is good for building, I guess. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times they've been cut down. They don't tend to, they don't set a lot of seed, and the insects seem to like the seed. So aren't always as prolific out in the wild as they'd like. And they often, many of them, not Delavei, but many of them have very straight trunks, which is good for wood as well. So they do tend to be pretty, endangered in a lot of areas.
And you mentioned the issue with insects kind of messing with the seeds. That's always been a really difficult thing with collecting seed of these, is a lot of times they've been compromised by insects. Either they feed on them or they get inside of the seed and you try to get them through customs and they don't go. But that's been a huge problem with a lot of these to grow them from seed, is finding viable seed.
Yeah. We ran into that. That was another trip we made, was to Taiwan.
Yeah.
With support from the Magnolia Society International, to collect the two Magnolia species in Taiwan. Kachirachirai, I don't know if that sounds Kachirachirai, if I'm going southern.
That sounds right.
It is southern Taiwan, so maybe that's more appropriate. And Compressa, and we found Compressa, but almost all the seed was
compromised.
Chewed up. Yeah.
Chewed up. Last one I have, and again, I picked ones I don't know a lot about out of the collection that we have here. This is Cavalieri, I'm sorry. Again, I'm not sure where this one is from, but it has a very similar kind of coarse texture to it. Is that from over here too? No.
There's one in the Japanese in here. There's Ernestii and Cavalieri, which are very similar.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing for you. Well, let me start with this. I'll talk about this. Is like a big-leafed eternal spring, although it flowers a little bit later, but the same kind of flowers as that. Maudier is another one that's very similar. This has a larger leaf. But, we're talking about the taxonomists and switching them around. So there's Magnolia wilsoni. There was also a Michelia wilsoni. But when they all became Magnolias, you couldn't have two Magnolia wilsoni. So the original Magnolia wilsoni had precedence. And so Michelia wilsoni became Michelia ernestii, because it's named for Ernest Wilson. And it's another one that looks very similar to these. I don't know if there's a piece of it.
I thought I had it.
But
right here.
It's pretty similar. A little bit smoother textured leaf.
Maybe a little darker. Probably
the leaf stipules. Stipule scars are different, but I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to look right now.
No.
But it's also, we get a lot of damage on our Magnolia ernestii in cold winters. The top can really get fried, although it has survived. It's a good sized tree now. Blake, do we have any questions?
Oh boy, do we.
Oh boy.
Okie dokie. So first off, Marilyn wants to know, what conditions does Eternal Spring want as far as sun, soil, and moisture is concerned, and hardiness zone?
Moist, well-drained soil for most magnolias. Supplement with good mulch. I've grown it in some protected spots just to kind of get that extension of the bloom and not lose as many. I've seen it growing in full sun. I've seen it growing in shade. It flowers more with more light, obviously. It's one that's really hard to put in the wrong spot. I wouldn't put it in blazing sun in a parking lot. I would put it someplace where you might get a little bit of respite from like the really hard blasted summer sun.
They're one of the ones. A lot of these evergreen magnolias are ones that I find, if they're out in full sun,
they'll get some scorch on the leaves.
They'll get some scorch, or they'll just the green it'll yellow up a bit over the summer. It won't be that really nice dark green. Yeah. That's not true across the board, but. No. I think they look better with some afternoon shade if you can get it, and with something like something that's going to flower really early, like Eternal Spring. If you get it somewhere where you don't have those frost pockets, those areas of garden that you go out and you've got frost over here and none over there. If you keep it away from that helps. One cultivation thing, magnolias don't love root disturbance.
No.
So don't plant them where you're going to plant annuals every year and
Yep.
be digging in there and chewing it up all the time.
They have a very fleshy, primitive root system. That's a good point. They don't like to be messed around with.
Yeah. I mean, you can go in there and plant some perennials under it, but you don't want to be digging in there with a shovel all the time. They'll really resent that.
Yep.
What's about the most shade that any magnolia can take?
Well,
I mean, a lot of the evergreen ones, like when we've gone looking for them, they're in some pretty good shade, but you're not going to get as many flowers. So from a
Sure.
garden perspective, you think about the southern magnolias and big leaf magnolias. They grow in quite a bit of shade. Virginiana that can take more sun, but it can take a little bit of filtered shade as well. The cultivars, the deciduous ones, they want more sun. For eternal spring, this is probably the best situation, I think, because it gets protection from the structure. It's in a place where it's not in the wind, and it's also in a place where you can see it and you can get the fragrance of that.
Oh, yeah.
That's an important aspect of planting and placing this too, I think.
For sure.
and I'll say I've got some magnolias, some evergreen magnolias, in some pretty shady spots. They are not growing fast, but they're living just fine. I don't get many flowers, like Greg said, but it does okay. That's kind of the trade-off. But I don't have enough room to have them all out in sun, and I want them, so I have them out there, and they do well.
Yep.
No doubt.
And speaking of that, while I'm thinking of mine, I'll tell you, there is sometimes, it usually isn't bad out in the garden, you can get a scale insect on the leaf. Magnolia or camellia scale, T-scale on there. It's usually not too bad out in the garden, but it does happen. And I had one plant, it was a stressed plant. It came out of the nursery very stressed and went in my garden, and I didn't water it, and it was big and it was stressed, and it got scale really bad. And you know what I did? Because I don't like spraying, I went in and I stripped every single leaf off, put them in a plastic bag, threw them away, kind of blasted the stem, scraped it where I thought the scale was really bad, and that pretty much took care of it. And the tree, wasn't real happy with me, but it came back after that.
That's awesome.
It's usually the ones that are stressed that have the pest problems.
Sure.
Something I'm seeing more, didn't usually see it here that often, usually in the deep, dark parts of the South, Savannah and Charleston, they get some algal leaf spot. And that's just from moisture, high humidity. And that looks like there's a little bit of that on here. It's an aesthetic thing. It's not going to hurt the plant, but a good way to fix that is just to increase circulation around plants, but usually fairly kind of trouble-free.
I'm betting that's because those are the branches low enough that you could cut that were getting hit by spray from the lath house.
Yep.
I bet if you went up the tree, you wouldn't have had that at all.
No, this was low that I could reach it.
Yeah.
And that's why, and that's really not that bad. Yeah. But that's something I'm seeing more of from a pest standpoint.
Sure. And the eternal spring, so it's blooming now, so I guess you could consider it an early blooming magnolia. Do you know about how long of a bloom you can expect from any magnolia?
This thing goes on for a long time. I mean, it will be flowering still.
Eternal
month
spring.
And a half. Eternal spring. Yeah. It's a really good name.
I think that we had that 70-degree day a couple weekends ago when it really started to open up and got that chemical stuff going in the plant. But there's so many buds on the branches that haven't even opened yet that it'll go for a while.
Yeah, that's magnolias. You have early and mid and late season magnolias, but magnolias, especially the early and kind of early mid season ones, seem to be really dependent on weather.
Yep.
If it warms up, boom, they'll start going.
They're going to go.
And we have a Magnolia Maniacs here that flowers in December almost every year. Flowers heavily in December and gets blasted. And people, I say, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to protect them? I'm like, no, I'm going to enjoy the flowers now. And when they're gone, we'll have something else in flower. So
absolutely,
it's all right.
Okay, Jared would like to know if there are any weeping or pendulous forms of evergreen magnolia. He's not seen any.
I can't think of any Asian ones. No.
there are there's some named ones that got a lot of press early on, like Inspiration and Snowbird, and they're not
really weepy.
They just kind of are.
Yeah,
not
they're open. Inspiration in particular.
Now it's funny you say that. I think we ripped it out. When we were dealing with Serendipity, I got a piece of Serendipity as well as you. Serendipity, and I was trying to get Bobby Green to name it. At the same time we've gotten a named one called Weeping Magic or Weeping something or other.
Sure.
And it was just a terrible plant.
Oh.
From him. I love weeping things and I'm all about them, but that was one that even I was like, this thing is just no good.
I can't think of a broadleaf evergreen weeping plant that I like.
Sure.
That's a whole nother episode.
Fair enough.
Some camellias that I could.
There's a couple camellias, yeah. But
Yeah.
even some of those are kind of, they've been hit with herbicide.
I'm with you.
Okay, we got a question from Remco with regard to propagation. He wants to know, can't you just remove the flowering buds before using a branch as a cutting?
Well, if you're sticking a cutting with that has flowers on it, you definitely want to remove those buds. But the chemical processes have already changed. So when you take a cutting, you're having the plant reset itself, go back to zero, take those cells that are wood and xylem in there and have them revert from that to something that's undifferentiated and then become root cells. And if you've got the flowers there going, it's already started moving the different, the auxin levels and things like that are different. And my plant physiology is long in my past.
You're there.
But yeah, it's the hormone levels in the plant that you're dealing with.
It's a complicated process to propagate plants. Some things are super duper easy. You put them in a flat and walk away from them and they sprout roots, or but then there's that side of it too.
Yeah, and let me be clear. Many of these evergreen magnolias are fairly difficult to root, just with perfect timing, perfect, conditions. They can be very difficult to root. So if you add in something like flower buds, it gets even harder, which I'll put in another plug. I'll put in a plug for, we've talked about Magnolia Society International. It's a great organization to join. Greg and I are both on the board, even though I tried to claw my way off and
wouldn't let them go.
Pulled me back in.
Wouldn't let them go.
But one of the benefits for the Magnolia Society International is a seed exchange, not exchange, but you can send seed in, but you can get seed from them. And so sometimes you can get really unusual things. A lot of times what you'll get are these people who have done all these crosses.
Hand crosses.
They'll have extra seed, and you'll get a seed of Magnolia insignis by Magnolia Silk Road, an evergreen by a deciduous that may be a great plant, may be a terrible plant. But it's a lot of fun because you wait and the first time that flower opens, it's something new. You have no idea what it's going to look like, and it could be amazing.
If you're interested in magnolias that much, it's worth joining the Magnolia Society because it's such a good group to kind of disseminate that information. They have great meetings, they're great people, and the seed exchange is really, really good. But there's a lot of good information out there.
Yeah.
And Remco's following up with this question about cutting. So he wants to know if you would take them in the fall or winter because that's when they're not flowering.
Well, they've got their flower buds formed by the time you get to fall. I haven't found the best time for the magnolias. I tend towards everything if I'm struggling with it. My go-to time is mid-May to mid-June. For us here, adjust if you're farther away and colder or warmer. A lot of broadleaf evergreens root just fine during the winter. I don't know about magnolias. I would get with the new growth that's come out, past flowering, that hadn't formed any new flower buds, and it won't bend all the way over, but it'll, you can bend it and it'll maybe snap when you get it all the way, 180 degrees.
Okie dokie. Sophia would like to know, will you talk about Magnolia Figo?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. We did not talk about Magnolia Figo. This is the evergreen the non-native evergreen magnolia that often people know and don't know they know a magnolia. Michelia Figo, now Magnolia Figo, is what's known in the South as banana shrub. Small flowers, usually white, often with a little bit of purple tinge, although there are purple flowered ones, a variety of crassipes.
We go purple yellow
robe, a little bit of yellow. And it's not the showiest flower, usually on kind of a squat, small plant.
Very
more
close
of a
to the leaves along the branch.
But it's completely different than other magnolias in terms of fragrance. It's got a fruity fragrance. That's why it's called banana shrub, kind of banana fruity.
The
other magnolias have lemon
now and
fragrance.
later is that candy.
Banana now and later. Yeah, it's like it's artificial banana flavoring kind of fragrance.
Yeah.
I have not always been able to smell Figo, banana shrub, very well, but actually in Cambodia, we went to this little brand new botanic garden. And they had some there, and it was the most fragrant Figo I've ever smelled in my life. It was not very happy there, but it's a great plant. And there's some the purple queen that we grow is. I was talking with a plant breeder, Tom Ranney here, and he does work with Magnolias some, and I was saying this is one that should get into a breeding program because it's so good. And we were talking about, I was like, it's only so tall and grows this wide, kind of a squat pyramidal form. It has masses of flowers. They're really dark purple. It's hardier than some of the other Figos we've grown. And he kind of looked at it and said, well, what would I do with it?
Yeah.
It's already there. So we really like that. There's port wine is one you see a little bit more often. That's got the kind of the creamy yellow white with purple edges to the petals, and then there's white ones, the creamy white ones. One we've offered several times in auctions and things is Hagiwara Ever Blooming. I don't know if it's really ever blooming. It hadn't been for me, but it does flower. But yeah, I love the plant, and it's a real old-fashioned deep South.
They've been around for a while, and they tend to be pretty forgiving. I've seen them planted as a hedge for that smell. They can take a little bit of pruning too, but they've been around for a long time.
Yeah, I think if you were going to prune for a hedge, you probably couldn't beat Figo in terms of it tolerating that.
Yeah.
So Sven would like to know if we grow Magnolia conifera variety Chingii. He says it's very hardy for him over in Bjockridge, Belgium, and it has a very peculiar hanging flower.
Yes, so I'm glad to hear that it's very hardy for him. I always think of it as being very tender. We actually have it in our nursery and have been afraid to bring it out. Although we have some hybrids with Conifera Chingii that we got from Kevin Paris down in Spartanburg, who we've mentioned a couple times. So yeah, kind of like the Quang-tungensis, Magnolia Quang-tungensis, used to be Magnolia moto, has that same, the flower bud comes down and it hangs like a little egg on a ferruginous stalk before it opens, and then it opens hanging straight down. So you got to plant it where you can look up into that flower, but it's very cool.
I think we have a moto over here, don't we?
Quang-tungensis, yeah. Used to be Moto. May still have we don't have a Moto sign on it.
No.
While we're on the topic of magnolias in faraway exotic lands, Kathleen from northern Florida says that she has persistent problems with scale on her plants, and she wants to know if that's a problem with sweet bays.
I've not noticed that on sweet bay too much. Again, a lot of times scale infestation is a sign of stress in the plant. And that stress could be from a number of different things. Scale, to treat them, it's relatively easy, and I would determine which one you have if at all possible. But when that scale, the eggs hatch, and those little babies, which are called crawlers, come out, that's the time to treat for that. But I've not ever noticed it on Sweet Bay Magnolia. That's a plant that's usually fairly trouble-free. Some of the other evergreen ones, some of the ones that we've mentioned, I've seen it on, but it's usually plants in the nursery that are under a ton of stress, or they're in a planting where they've been planted too deep, or they're in a situation where it's just too much sun, or whatever. They're just stressed out, and the insects come and cause more damage. But I've not noticed it on Sweet Bay.
Yeah, I would think with her Sweet Bay, if she's getting a lot of a scale, it's either there's an issue with the soil or planting depth, or possibly for some reason got a northern form. When I talk about magnolias growing from Canada down through Central America, South America, the ones that start in Canada are Magnolia virginiana, the Sweet Bay Magnolia, and they go all the way down through Florida to Cuba. But if you're growing a northern form in North Florida, it may be much more under stress than if you were growing the southern form.
And if you've got camellias in your garden that have camellia scale on, a lot of times they'll jump to other things around them. And look closely to be sure their scale. It might be something like the algal leaf spot, or something on the underside of the leaf, possibly.
But yeah, I don't know if somebody's doing it now, but in North Georgia at the Extension Center or the Gardens of the Big Bend, they have been doing a lot of work with Magnolia. So somebody there might be able to help you out with identification.
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah. In Gainesville.
Yes.
Or Quincy.
Outside of Gainesville, Quincy.
Okie dokie. We are running a bit short on time. I think we have time for one more question. This is from Marilyn. She wants to know if Magnolia cavallerii is fragrant.
Yeah. It's not as fragrant as some, but it's
not like this.
It's not like this, but same kind of the fragrance for a lot of these is that lemony fragrance that you probably know from
our southern and even the Sweet Bay. It's all kind of in that, and different levels of intensity.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's strong like this or strong like a good southern. It's more subtle, but it does have fragrance.
Cool beans. Well, that is all of the questions and all of the time we have for today. So thank you, Mark and Greg, for pulling together this presentation. Thought it was wonderful. We learned a lot about magnolias, but we learned a lot of other general horticultural topics like integrated pest management, propagation, and the concept of provenance when selecting plants.
Ferruginous.
And ferruginous buds, y'all. Oh my goodness. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We hope you will join us next week at 3 o'clock. We will be doing the midweek program again on Wednesday. We will have Patrick McMillan in for a garden conversation, and he's an honest-to-goodness television star, so you're not going to want to miss that. So we will see you next Wednesday at 3. Y'all take care.